Time for AG. I think at this point, I'm going to reach out to our Office of Equity, Director Megan Matthews. Are you here? Here we are.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you all doing? Good. I also wanted to say, this isn't part of it, I also want to say we have the Keep Washington Working Law or Act that talks about how we work with ICE and things like that for youth. I'll look up the Keep Washington Working Law. So I'm Megan Matthews. I'm the Director of Washington State's Office of Equity. We are in the Governor's Office. And we are a handful and one of the first that was established in 2020. I'm from Tacoma, Washington. Me too. That's right. I'm 5'3". I born and raised on Hilltop, and then I graduated from Lincoln High School. Any A's in the house?
Who are you?
What? Unacceptable. I was like, y'all need to get down here next year. So what that means, I'm lifelong born and raised Washingtonian. And like our AG, who's been here for a long time, like I care about Washington State in a personal way, right? And there aren't a lot of us leading. So I'm the state agency, not elected official. There are very few black leaders of state agencies, and right now I'm the only black woman. So I would say that your support matters, your voices matter all year, right? So sometimes with the news, when it's news and media's got it, it's hot, everybody's looking at it, and then when it goes away, folks, we forget, right? Progress happens, but so does the backlash. Time and time again, we see that in our history, right? Reconstruction, you all know about Reconstruction, right? Right after slavery, we made some of the biggest movements to make the system fair after slavery. So for youth, I would look at Reconstruction. And then what happened? Jim Crow, the backlash, okay? So right now, we're in a backlash period. But we can't forget that after the Civil Rights Act and the movement passed, we had those laws passed, we kind of like, we did it! All right, y'all, we did it, let's go, right? And then the backlash starts happening, slowly, but very intentionally, very strategically. So I would just ask that you all keep that in your minds, and no matter if it's in the media or not, you're doing your own work. Because the system is all of us. So the Washington State Office of Equity, our law, we have a law that guides us. Our law is RCW 43.06D. Okay, 43.06D. That's our statute. Look that up. And it's a lot of words in there, but what I say is we're going to facilitate policy and systems change. Systems change, right? So that's huge, and we're all part of the system. We're going to do our part to make sure that government agencies, as policy is created, right, as legislation passes and we have law, state agencies get to implement that law. And we don't always do it in a way that's helpful, because like I said, there's not a lot of us we're not very diverse in some of those decision-making spaces. So as you're considering running for a public office, I would also ask you to join the state. It's not all bad, I promise, okay? Like I promise. But we're doing really incredible work, and a lot of us are very passionate. We're passionate about the work we do, but we are all limited by our own perspectives. Each of us in this space has a unique perspective. And when that's not represented in state agencies, there are gaps. And so when we talk about policy and systems change, we want to make sure that the processes state agencies put in place reflect the intention of the legislation and are done in a way that works for everybody, right? So one example, let me give you a tangible example. We're working right now on our state contracting processes. So we're working with 12 different state agencies. Because as I've heard around Washington State, I heard from small business owners that they can't compete for state contracts. It's really hard as a small business owner to compete for the billions of dollars that state gives out in contract dollars all the time. And I feel like if we better invested in our small businesses, we would have a more thriving economy in Washington State, right? So some of those things are, where do we market our opportunities, our contract opportunities, our RFPs? Where do we share that information? Because if you don't know there's an opportunity, you can't compete for it, right? What are the criteria that go into our RFPs? If it's something that says something like that, you already work for the state and you haven't, that is a barrier, right? What are our screening processes? Who gets to screen, right? Because whoever's evaluating, it's like a job application. Whoever evaluates your job application decides whether you move forward or not. Are there enough different perspectives in those processes? And prompt pay, right? Small businesses can't float dollars from month to month. They need to get paid when they do the work, right? So those are some of the things that we're working on, and I want to do that across all of our systems. So as we're doing legislation, because oftentimes there are more than one agency that's involved in the process. You can look at healthcare system, several agencies involved in that. You can look at our education system. We have OSPI, but there's a lot of different agencies, higher ed, that are involved in the quality of education. We don't work together. We're siloed. So what we can do in our office is bring those groups together so that we create processes that are effective, that deal with the whole system, that are work with you all too, because we want to do better partnership with community, all members of Washington State, and then no matter where you live. So in Eastern and Central Washington, we're going to work with them too, right? No matter if you're way up north or on the coast or in a rural area, we want to work with everybody to make sure that what the state does works for everybody. So that's a little bit about our office. I really would say that your support matters, and for Ed Prince, the folks that are in state too, we can use your support as well. Just letting folks know that you value the work. There was legislation dropped, House Bill 1959, to abolish the Office of Equity. So I want you to tell that what's happening across the nation, we're not immune to it here. So we just want to make sure that you all give your voice, because whatever you all advocate for is more likely to move forward. It's active, it's not hasn't occurred yet, but it's in the committee.
And what's the number again?
House Bill 1959. Well, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but I just want to educate you right now on that.
Coming up for discussion?
Huh?
Do you know when it's coming up for discussion?
It hasn't been scheduled for a hearing yet.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Yes. So the question was, great question, and I'm like, oh, I wish Superintendent Chris Reichel was here right now, OSPI. So the question was that program, that education that serves folks, specific folks for minority children, and wait, say that one more time. Also minority. Yeah, programs and activities that focus on minority students, and especially with education, that there's going to be funded. Now, I would also say too that so there is a coalition building, right? There are folks coming together across states within Washington State. I was just on a meeting with some folks who are in this work, with city and county as well, healthcare organizations. We want to make sure that we're building coalition, because when we are stronger together, right? Part of it is if we're fighting our own fights independently, it can't go as far. So the one thing that we're doing is trying to come together, trying to make sure that we're sharing resources and information, knowing too that an executive order doesn't create law, right? So it directs agencies, federal agencies on what to do, and then you have our attorney general who can sue when it's not legal, right? Also, we are working, part of what we are trying to do in our office is talk about what is it that we do, right? When we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, what does that mean, right? I went home one time, I was just coming, I went to a soul food restaurant, and I said, oh yeah, I'm a DEI specialist. And he was like, what is that? Right? He's Black man. So some of this is, we need to use language that makes sense. We need to tell people what is it that we're actually trying to do. In the Office of Equity, we are advancing a Washington for all. So the work that we do wants to work for everybody. And that's part of what we're doing, is working on the language that we use to make sure that we can still go ahead, because we have a lot of state laws. Washington State is strong laws that protect people's civil rights, right? And so we really live in a great state. So you continue to advocate for the states, for the laws that are being passed. Reach out to OSPI, the Office of the Superintendent for Public Instruction. There we go. They set a lot of the guidance for our K-12 system, and they have been putting out information about how our schools should respond, their processes and their procedures to make sure our students are protected at school. So I would visit their website to look at what they put out. I'm only on LinkedIn, really, so don't. One of my team members like to clown me. He says nobody looks on LinkedIn no more. But they put a lot of guidance on their social media too. That's how you get informed. You have to be connected with the folks. Attorney General, they have a distribution list that they send out all the actions. Sign up for their gov delivery, sign up for OSPI's gov delivery, so then you can be better in the know of what's happening and what your rights are and how to respond. Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker here is Washington State Department of Transportation Secretary Julie Merritt.
I'm really glad I didn't have to follow Nick Brown. He's going to be hard to follow. Oh, sure. I said I'm really glad I didn't have to follow Nick Brown. He'd be hard to follow today. So my name is Julie Meredith, and I'm the new Secretary of Transportation. I may be new to this position, but I've worked for the Washington State Department of Transportation my entire professional career. Yep, that's 36 years, which is kind of hard to say, but I've spent 36 years delivering for the citizens of the state of Washington, and I'm so proud to be part of an agency that builds a reliable, safe network for the state's residents and our economy. I do want to make it clear that our agency and Governor Ferguson remain committed to keeping Washington State a place that supports every resident's civil rights and recognizes diversity, equity, and inclusion as our strength in the state. In my former position at WashDOT, I oversaw some of the largest programs that the state had. So the replacement of the 520 floating bridge, development of the 405 corridor, and the Gateway program, Alaska Way Viaduct, some of the projects I've worked on. Under my leadership in the last state fiscal year, those mega programs alone paid $96 million to small, minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. Of that, $34 million were paid to minority business owners, so I'm very proud of that. I'm also lucky to get to work with Earl Key, who leads our Office of Equity and Civil Rights to enhance our diverse business programs. So our agency will continue to monitor diverse business compliance on all our projects, including the mega projects. Across the state, WashDOT works closely with Black-owned contracting businesses. And according to our studies, Black-owned and Native-owned contracting businesses face unique struggles working with our WashDOT contractors that others don't. And as Secretary of Transportation, I will continue committing the resources to ensure we have the tools to eliminate discrimination on our projects. I am looking to increase diversity within our agency. That includes making sure our agency and our workforce reflects the communities that we work in. Black people make up 4.5% of Washingtonians. WashDOT is working to reflect that, but building the number of Black employees up from the 2%. And I am happy to say that in the hiring in the last several years, we've made a lot of strides. So I don't want to say young people, but people with less experience that we've hired are more diverse. And while there may be some recent uncertainty about federal programs, I'd like to say that the federal programs are fluid. That makes it, that describes it for me. As you heard, we have strong programs and state laws, such as the Healthy Environments for All Act, and these require us to work to protect neighborhoods that have seen more than their fair share of transportation projects. And as Governor Ferguson recently shared, our state and agency values have not changed and will not change. And I will continue to support funding programs that are relevant to the diverse business community and maintain the agency's commitment to internal and external diversity efforts. We are developing 3 additional programs to help address the underuse of Black-owned firms. We have a capacity building mentorship program in place, and it will continue to be in place to grow that part of that. We're working on a trucking consortium, which is under development. And we had a trucking rotation program in place on the Alaska Way Viaduct program, and we're working to expand that across our agency. We have recently increased our public small works business goals from 5% to 20%. So uncertainty and the swirl around the disadvantaged business program, the federal program, has led to our actions. So our actions increase the ability for the small and diverse contractors to participate in our contract. If your firm is certified for the state program by the Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprises, you should automatically have this certification. The state also has the Pre-Apprenticeship and Support Services Program, or PASS program. This supports diverse people who want to work in our highway construction projects. 553 Black Washingtonians have participated in this program since 2015, and 206 Black individuals have joined since July of 2023. That represents a huge recent growth in Black participation, obtaining pathways and meaningful living wage jobs in highway construction programs. Since 2017, WashDOT has moved to establish race and general neutral state programs. This is to increase diverse participation in our construction projects. It also has helped prepare us for the changing political environment that we now live in. I know that our programs are most successful when we engage with everyone that we're affecting with our work. And we do at first, we do our best to listen, and we pay attention to what we hear that matters in the Black community. So what we hear is jobs, mentorships, apprenticeships, work for Black-owned businesses, and healthy communities for all. And I'd like to thank you for having me here today, and your continued partnership is necessary for the success of our program. And on that, I look forward to working with you all in a future life.
Give one more applause to our.
That's yours. Oh. No, that's mine. Oh, I see. It looks just like mine. No, that's mine. What did I do with it?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Rolland Daniel, and I'm here to present an individual. Oh, I'm first vice president of APRI. Yeah. So we're now going to hear from our treasurer of the state.
I'll like a piece of pastry.
No, it's on.
Do I have to pay?
Thank you.
Okay, how's everyone doing today? It is good to see you. My name is Mike Pellicciati. I am treasurer of Washington. Hey, you know, I love talking to all of you every year. This is always one of my favorite groups to be with. To see a lot of friends. Last time I was here with some folks from Federal Way. Anyone here from Federal Way again? And some other folks here. You know, Jesse Johnson and I both represented Federal Way in the state legislature. Now, Jesse and I both work in the office of the state treasurer. We work on a lot of things. I was talking a little bit about what the treasurer's office does. And then I want to talk about some of the things we're working on. And then really what I find to be helpful is opening up for any questions that you have. That might be good. So, treasurer's office, you know, we serve a couple different functions. We invest some money, about $35 billion that we invest for state and local governments. And then I also serve as the state's banker in terms of money in, money out, kind of write the checks. the state of Washington to do some other things. But we're dealing with a lot of things right now nationally. I don't think I need to tell anyone that. What I can tell you is one of the big focuses that I have, and I'm really pleased you're able to just hear from Attorney General Brown, is I've been talking about a triangle of leadership that we need in our state, which means the governor, the state treasurer, and the attorney general working together as a trio to respond and provide strength to defend ourselves from what's going on nationally right now. And, you know, the biggest threat to us nationally is the fact of the federal government withholding or not sending money that they're legally obligated to send to the people of the state of Washington. And we have been preparing, as Jesse knows this, we've been preparing in our office literally for about 7 or 8 months for this situation. And, you know, I remember talking to folks in our team, with, you know, over those last several months saying, I hope this is the biggest waste of time we ever spend in our office preparing for anything. Because this is ridiculous. We shouldn't have to be preparing for this. But unfortunately, it was some of the best use of time that we could possibly have. So what happened is when the president unlawfully blocked money from coming to the state of Washington and federal grants to everyone, to every state, to every local government, we were ready to go. And so what we did is we had been partnering and ready to go, so that we had essentially a lawsuit ready to go right away, partnering with Attorney General Brown and the good work he did in bringing that lawsuit, so that within 24 hours, a federal judge said no. The federal judge said you are violating the law and you have to the law. And we are going to be from this day on going to be continue to be prepared for what's coming. Now, and I also want to be clear, for as much preparation and for the good work in that trio of leadership between Governor Ferguson, Attorney General Brown, and my office, I also can't sugarcoat it, right? Things are challenging and things are going to continue to be challenging. But what I can tell you is we are going to take the firm position, as we have, that the president needs to follow the law. Right? And if we do that, the money that Congress has directed to be sent out will continue to flow. And if that happens, we are going to continue to make sure that we protect the financial interests of the people of the state of Washington and make sure that we're in a position so that we're able to continue operating and protect everything that makes being in Washington great. And what I will also say, for all those challenges, there is no state I would rather be in the United States than the state of Washington. But I will wrap up with this, which is, for all the stuff where it feels like we're on the defense, and guess what, we kind of are, right? I gotta be honest with you, right? We are. But part of preparation is making you feel better, because when things come at you, it's not a surprise, right? And so when we were hit with the federal withholding, or essentially the money was blocked, guess what? We have been talking to states all around the country, state treasurers in every state, Democratic state around the country, for them to prepare. So when this happens, we have lawsuits ready to go all over the place, and it didn't catch us flat-footed. We were prepared and in a position where we could step up and represent the interests and values of the people of the state of Washington. But for all of the fact that we are on the defense, it doesn't mean we don't continue moving forward as a state. And so my office here in the Office of State Treasurer, through Jesse Johnson's good leadership in our office, is putting forward different initiatives here in Olympia right now to make sure we continue to move our state forward. Now I want to talk about 2 of them, and then I want to open up for any questions you have. Number 1 is something called baby bonds. Now, our office, and Jesse has been leading this effort, the idea of baby bonds, called the Washington Future Fund, is addressing the wealth gap that we have in our state. And saying, hey, for every child who's born pursuant to an Apple Health funded birth, which is 47% of the births in our state, we are asking the legislature to set aside $4,000 at birth to be invested, so that when that child is now a young adult, that money has grown to $15,000, $25,000, $30,000 waiting for that, to remove those financial barriers that often deny access to wealth creation, generation of wealth. Funds would be in a position where it could be now directed by that individual to decide how they want to use it. Do they want to use it for educational or vocational opportunities? So they no longer are in a situation where they're denied access to vocational opportunities because they can't afford to do a pre-apprenticeship program, or take 3 months off with no pay to do a pre-apprenticeship program. Or it can be used for college attainment, or it can be used to start a small business, because what's the first thing someone with a great business idea has? They go to their bank and they say, hey, I got this business model, I got this now, and the bank's like, that's a great business plan. Where's your seed money? Where's your skin in the game, right? You're like, hey, I got a great business model. Like, hey, where's the seed money? Well, not everyone is like the president. You get a small $1 million loan that he puts it from his dad, right? But what we should have is people that have the opportunity with good ideas to be able to be entrepreneurs and do the things that best serve their community by allowing them to have that capital barrier, that financial barrier removed, because this money is available to be directed in that way. Or importantly, it can be used, this money can be used for property ownership. So that we can finally interrupt the cycle where folks are unable to own property and be denied the opportunity for generational wealth growth that comes from that. And through the baby bond proposal that we put together, it would actually allow for, in all but 2 of our 39 counties, in all but 2 of our 39 counties in our state, if someone is FHA loan approved, the funds would be sufficient for someone to actually have a down payment for property or to own a house. And I know this because this is what happens when you start following the money. Right? When you have a position like state treasurer and you use it in a position in the best interest of the people of the community, you can still make things happen. This is responsible, this is long-term, this is how you invest. And guess what? This is what is already happening with people of wealth. Because the first thing that happens when a child is born, of parents and grandparents' needs, is they put money aside, they put the stock aside, they allow it to grow to meet those needs. Well, other parents no less loving, those other grandparents are no less loving, they would do it if they could. But this is an opportunity to make sure that everyone has access to generational wealth and the opportunity for wealth creation throughout one's life. So I talked about that. That is a proposal that's currently being heard in our legislature to develop a pilot project related to that this year. Like I said, feel free to talk to Jesse, who's leading this up in the office, if you have additional questions with that. I don't know if Jesse wants to say hi to everyone, in case for those who don't know. And then, so one other thing we'll work on now, I want to open up for questions. I feel very strongly that everyone should have access to financial education. It is beyond time where Washington State is now one of a minority of states that does not require financial education in our schools, and in doing so denies the opportunity for economic empowerment that comes from that education, that information. One should not be reliant on whether their parents can understand the complexities of financial education today, on whether or not they know to sign this document or that document, or how this applies to them, or sign here or sign there, and things that have incredible impact throughout people's lives, very early in their lives, and they should have the tools necessary to be able to navigate that. And so we have a bill to finally require the financial education be taught in our schools today. It's being considered by the legislature. Feel free to share with your legislators your thoughts related to that. And with that, I point that out because even when we are facing the winds that are blowing at us, again, I can't sugarcoat it, right? I cannot sugarcoat it. We are dealing with some major things. But we can still keep moving forward despite the winds blowing at our face. And we are showing how to do that, and we're showing when we do this the right way, we can really move the entire state forward. So with that, happy to open up for any questions.
Like all the young people first.
I think we got one gentleman behind them. Go ahead.
I was wondering because a lot of people in like getting ready to have but you know, like Washington has like one of the highest gas prices. So I was wondering like what initiatives were like being taken like to equitable access to affordable fuel for everyone.
Great question. So those in here, and I want to repeat it in the back, you say, hey, look, we've got folks who are letting drive and other folks, gas prices are expensive, and we have one of the highest gas taxes. We say, I don't think you mentioned that, but sure. And so it is kind of like, how do we make sure folks have equal access to the roads, given the cost of fuel? I think it's a great question. I think one of the other aspects of it is you have a lot of folks who can afford more fuel-efficient vehicles. And in doing so, they're able to actually not be paying gas tax at all related to that. So, you know, I think it's one of the biggest challenges the legislature is going to be facing is how do we keep paying for our roads when cars are getting more fuel efficient? And what that means is you're gonna have some folks who also don't, are paying full tank on the gas or paying to have full ride on that. And I guess what I would say is that it's a really good issue to bring up with your legislature. That is an issue they're dealing with right now. They literally, there's a bill drop just this week related to the future of gas tax and what that looks like. And I think talking about that issue of equity around that is going to be really important. Because I'm not hearing that a lot from the legislature. They're looking at just how do you kind of balance this out and make it pencil out in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think that's a really important issue to be great for. Thanks. That's a great question.
She said that she didn't nobody told her.
Right, so the question up front, for those of you here in the back, was, hey, how's everything happening federally affect Washington's budget? Which is like the best question you can have, because that is literally like the main thing we're working on right now. It doesn't help, right? It does not help. It is about as challenging as you could possibly have right now. Because at a time when we should be navigating, the legislature should be navigating some of the budget challenges that exist on how to plan things out going forward, we're in a situation where when those federal dollars were withheld, that is equivalent to $2 billion a month of money going to the state treasury that was blocked. That was lawfully directed by Congress. So we're not talking about federal dollars for Social Security, or federal dollars for the military, or federal dollars for some federal Hanford facility for nuclear waste. We're talking money directly into the state treasury. And here's why it matters. I think it's why it's such an important question. We get $27.4 billion a year from the federal government and state treasury. Guess where the majority of that money goes? Healthcare, Medicaid, Apple Health. It's the federal match to Apple Health. Washington State has one of the most expanded Apple Health or Medicaid-funded healthcare systems in the country. And guess what? When that federal money doesn't come in, there's going to be a real pressure on the legislature on how to handle it. There's not enough money, I can tell you. There's not enough state money to take the place of those federal dollars. So that's going to put a squeeze on those federal dollars that are then, or the state dollars that are available to provide health care. So I want to raise this issue now because it's such an important issue. That's when I say we can't sugarcoat it. There are challenges ahead, but we need to be talking about this now, so we need to be preparing about it. It's not something we want to just be surprised about when it comes. I think that's the biggest challenge is how to affect health care. I really appreciate it.
Where's our office now that James get involved and
Yeah, great question. So the question was, hey, there was some coverage on funding for the AG's office. I'm sorry, the attorney, good question. The Attorney General, right? So you just heard Attorney General Brown, right? He represents the Attorney General's office. Let me say this, when I talk about the trio of leadership, right, that triangle of leadership in our state between the governor, the Attorney General, and the state treasurer, you know what the three of us have in common? All three of us have worked in the Attorney General's office. Right, I was an Assistant Attorney General for years. Obviously, Bob Ferguson, our governor, was the Attorney General, and Nick Brown is the Attorney General. So I don't think there are three people who care more about the Attorney General's office than the three of us, because we know the importance that it can do. What I can also say is, Governor Ferguson has been very clear as it's been related to that there are budget cuts across the board. Right? In our office, we're doing a 6% budget cut that we're applying. I have heard Governor Ferguson say specifically, he would never do any cut. Truly, nobody loves the AG's office more than Bob Ferguson, our former Attorney General. He would not do any budget cut that would impact the work of that office. And I take him at his word on that. And, I don't represent the Attorney General's office now, but I also know how the funding works. It's not my determination, the legislature makes the determination as to the distribution of funds. They control the purse the same way Congress does. It's not my job in the executive branch to not cut the checks. In the same way it's not the job of the president and his U.S. Treasury to not cut those checks. Right? It's up to the legislature in our state, it's up to Congress, national. But what I would say is, I am confident that Attorney General Brown would not allow it to impact the services being provided, and I'm absolutely confident Governor Ferguson, who loves the AG office, would do anything that would impact the delivery services, because that's the power. When I talk about the trio of leadership, that's the power to push back. I'm confident Governor Ferguson's not going to do anything to kneecap that in any way. Yeah, great question. So the question of those who didn't hear it was, hey, baby bonds, she likes the idea. It's generating a lot of money for folks. How does that work? And how is that sustainable, right? All good questions. We spent a year, and Jesse led this effort of having essentially a Washington Future Fund Committee, a baby bond committee to hash out all those issues. What we're asking is that the legislature set aside $4,000 for every newborn that is born. So this is what happens when time is on your side. You set that aside, and that money gets invested. That's how you get to the $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 when they're an adult. Because guess what? And this is why this is so important. For exactly the reason you're saying, it is not really possible for the legislature to fund it at the full amount now. You need to be able to set the money aside to allow for it to invest. We say that's what parents do because they don't have the money to meet their kids' needs when they're older. So they set the money aside early and allow for the power of investing, the power of that growth. It would be less than 0.5% of the overall budget that we're asking the legislature to reserve and set aside. That would generate for 47% of newborns upwards of $20,000 to $30,000 for them when they're adults. 0.5 to 1% of the budget. So I can tell you it is possible. We are not, I will also point out, we're doing a pilot project this year because of the budget challenge. We're doing this pilot project to show the legislature the impact it can have. So we're asking as a part of the pilot project that a certain amount of money be set aside for certain beneficiaries to show that impact. That if someone now would receive the amount that actually they would receive when they were an adult through this program. To show what happens when folks have the money to get down payment to own the property, to buy the house, to now be able to show how they can generate wealth and not create debt and only provide to show that impact. And then inform legislators so they can put this money aside to make this happen. What I can tell you is this is something that is affordable and doable because we're setting $4,000 aside for a child and allow them to grow the investment.
Under Treasurer, your good lawsuits will slow the new Confederate government down until they get in front of their new Supreme Court. So thank you for your work so far. Moving forward into this escalating civil war, what is your financial plan as treasurer to defend us not only against those ultimate funding cuts, but also the tariffs that the new Confederacy has imposed on our two major trading partners as well, Canada and China, and the Pacific Rim economy? And would we not have more options to defend ourselves against all these attacks if Washington had our own state bank? And are you in communication with the treasurers of Oregon and California about unifying our efforts to resist the new Confederacy?
Well, look, I guess I reject the presentation in which you're describing our federalist government. But what I will say is this. What is important, and I did an op-ed, I wrote an article in the Seattle Times and the Sunday Seattle Times on the issue of the importance of state sovereignty as it relates to having sufficient reserves for the state. Let me talk about what reserves are. Reserves are essentially the money being set aside that the state has to meet its needs. It goes to the heart of the good question that was over here in dealing with the federal budget issue, which is we need to have sufficient money set aside to meet the needs that we know we will have as a state, so that we do not face federal coercion from the federal government. And so, again, there is no more effective tool the federal government has in trying to force a state to do something that the state has certain constitutional rights through the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. We have these protections where under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, and all these policy decisions are not up to the president. They are up to individual states to make these determinations. Now, look, there were a lot of folks who liked states' rights before, right? We used to hear about that a lot. And suddenly it's like, what? I never heard that term before. Look, the 10th Amendment is the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. Those policy issues are reserved to the states. And what is important is we should be able to make the determination that best meets the needs of the state of Washington is the state of Washington. But, so what I think is really critical, though, is that we can only make those determinations if we are not going to face federal coercion by a federal withholding of funds. And the way you respond to unlawful federal withholding of dollars is you have sufficient money in the bank. Right? If you got a job and your boss says, hey, I think you need to smile more at work, right? You're like, go to hell. And your boss is like, well, I'm not paying you on Friday. And you say to yourself, well, I'm going to sue you, but it's going to take a while. There's a lot of coercion with that, right? That's real. But it's still unlawful, but it takes time to work that out. What we can't be is in a situation where we are not financially positioned to weather those litigation. That's why I say triangle of leadership, right? We got to be in a position where we can weather those forces of attack. And we can do that if we maintain our financial strength. But what I will say is also this. I mean when I say there is no state I would rather be in than the state of Washington, because our office has been working very, very hard on this issue for our financial strength. That has been our focus. Issues of reserve, not having too much debt. We have a AAA credit rating, which is the top credit rating. It's like our personal credit score. It's the top you can have from Moody's. That's the position of strength you want to be in, to be able to weather the storms and things that are coming our way. And we're going to
It sounds like a fantastic program to have, to put in a fund, to at least have the place on there. What happened to those funds? Is that how
It's a great question. So the question was for our baby bonds proposal. Money being set aside for every child born, students without the help at birth. What happens if they don't reach age? It's a great question. It's one of the things our committee worked on. You are not a beneficiary of this program until you claim the funds later. So you have to be eligible at birth, and it's at the time in which you claim it at adulthood that you're a beneficiary. There are two reasons for that. One is you have to be a Washington resident when you claim it. Two, it addresses our state constitution, which normally does not allow for what's called a gift of public funds. It's something in our state constitution.
There's two right
Unless
here.
it's an issue of poverty, we can establish that there's poverty at the front end, there's poverty when you're claiming it later. So it satisfies the constitutional issue, so it's a constitutionally sound program. And three, we do it so that it also doesn't impair one's benefits as a kid. Because what you don't want is to have money in your name that denies your ability to receive benefits as a child, and doesn't allow you to then grow and have the support that you need to then have those funds later that would allow you to kind of jumpstart your life. So it's for all those three reasons. So to answer your question directly, you do not receive those benefits until you're a beneficiary later, and you have to be eligible based on the position. All right. All right, we're done. Thank you so much.